What if the dream you've carried in your heart for years never becomes reality? And more importantly, what if it's not because you weren't capable, but because you didn't know how to protect it? Every great dream begins with a spark. Maybe it's the vision of becoming an artist, an entrepreneur, a leader, or even just building a better life for your family. But along the way, life has a cruel way of testing us. People doubt us, circumstances challenge us, and slowly, that spark fades. Most dreams don't die because they're impossible. They die because they are unprotected. And today, I want to show you how to keep yours alive. Imagine a young man standing on a basketball court late at night. The lights are dim, his shoes are worn out, and his friends have all gone home. Everyone tells him he'll never make it, that he's too small, too weak, too average. But he stays. He practices. He sweats. He refuses to quit. Years later, that same young man walks into a packed stadium, cheered by thousands. People call him talented, but they don't see the nights he almost gave up. They don't see the moments he felt crushed by failure. What kept him going wasn't luck, or talent, or even opportunity. It was protection, protecting his dream from negativity, from self-doubt, from the easy temptation to give up. And here's the truth. Your dream will face storms too. People will doubt you. Life will test you. But if you protect it, if you keep showing up when no one is watching, your dream will not only survive, it will grow into something greater than you can imagine. It begins in silence. Not the kind of silence that's empty, but the kind that feels like the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. A young boy, no more than 12, lies awake in his small bedroom. The walls are thin, paint peeling at the corners, and the hum of traffic outside drifts through the cracked window. His family doesn't have much. The fridge rattles when it runs, the heater coughs in the winter, and sometimes his mother works 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. But tonight, none of that matters, because inside this boy's chest, something is stirring. He stares at the ceiling, his heart pounding with an excitement he can't quite explain. It's not money, not toys, not even praise he longs for. It's a vision. A glimpse of a life larger than the one he sees around him. He pictures himself on a stage, or maybe on a court, or maybe building something with his hands so extraordinary that the world will have no choice but to notice. He doesn't know what form it will take yet, but he feels it. The dream has been born. That whisper inside him says, "You are meant for more." The boy doesn't share it with anyone, not yet. He knows too well how fragile it feels. Like a flame cupped between trembling hands, one gust of doubt, one careless laugh from someone older, and it could go out. So he keeps it hidden, tucked away like a secret treasure. Every night, he pulls it out in his mind, polishing it with imagination. He dreams of applause, of victory, of building a life where he no longer has to watch his mother's tired face as she comes home late, shoulders slumped, shoes worn thin. He whispers to himself, "One day, I'll change everything." Outside his room, the world is indifferent. Bills pile up, neighbors argue, the city grinds on. But in that boy's small, fragile heart, something sacred has begun. It isn't skill yet. It isn't opportunity. It isn't even belief strong enough to fight the storms he'll face. But it is a seed, and like every mighty tree, it begins small, invisible to the world, growing quietly in the dark. He doesn't know that most people lose this seed. They let others trample on it. They let fear poison it. They let time bury it under excuses. But tonight, in the silence of his room, he promises himself he won't let that happen. He closes his eyes, not to escape reality, but to see his future more clearly. The dream burns brighter in his imagination than any streetlight outside. And though he cannot explain it, he knows deep down, this is the night his life changed forever. The birth of a dream is never loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It arrives quietly, like a whisper only you can hear. And if you listen closely, if you dare to believe, it can change the entire course of your life. The boy drifts into sleep, the spark still alive within him. Tomorrow, life will look the same. The peeling paint, the tired faces, the struggles. But inside, nothing will ever be the same again. Because a dream has been born. Morning comes like it always does. Sunlight creeping through thin curtains. the distant sound of horns, the rattle of a bus engine on the corner. For most kids, it's just another day. But for him, something feels different. The dream that was born last night hasn't disappeared with sleep. It lingers, alive, demanding to be remembered. He slips into his worn-out sneakers, laces fraying at the edges. They aren't the best shoes, not even close, but to him, they are enough. He steps outside and feels the cool air hit his face. The street is alive. Men hurrying to work, mothers dragging sleepy kids to school, neighbors already arguing about something that doesn't matter. The world spins the same as always, but inside him, something burns. At recess, while other kids laugh and play, he pulls a ball from under his arm. It's scuffed, faded, the leather cracked, but when it touches his hands, it feels like power. He starts to dribble, the sound echoing in the yard. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The rhythm becomes a heartbeat, steady and strong. He shoots, misses, shoots again, misses again. The other kids laugh, but he doesn't care. He isn't here to impress them. He's here because every missed shot feels like a step closer to the dream he saw last night. One teacher notices. Standing by the door, arms crossed, she watches him chase the ball across the yard. He trips, falls, scrapes his elbow, but jumps back up before the pain even registers. There's no hesitation, no quitting. Something inside him has already decided, this is worth it. Later that evening, when the world is winding down, he finds himself outside again. The sky is painted orange and purple, the air cooling as the day fades. He dribbles under the dim light of a street lamp, the shadows stretching long. Each bounce echoes against the cracked pavement, a lonely rhythm in the night. To anyone passing by, it looks like just a kid messing around. But to him, this is sacred. This is where the fire grows. The ball slips, rolls into the gutter. He chases it, wipes it off, and starts again. Sweat pours down his face, dripping into his eyes, but he doesn't stop. His chest burns, legs ache, but still he pushes. Because deep down he knows, dreams don't grow by accident. They grow by fire, by discipline, by refusing to let the world decide what you are worth. His mother steps outside, apron still tied around her waist, tired from another long shift. She watches him for a moment, the determination etched into his small frame. She shakes her head, half smiling, half worried. She knows the world is cruel. She knows dreams are dangerous, fragile things. But as she watches her son, she sees something unshakable in his eyes. "Come inside, baby," she calls softly. "It's getting late." He nods, but not before taking one last shot. The ball arcs high, cutting through the fading light, and swishes clean through the hoop nailed crookedly to the garage wall. He freezes, breath caught in his throat. It's the first time he's made it all day. And in that single moment, the fire ignites. It's not about the shot. It's about the proof that maybe, just maybe, the dream whispering in his chest isn't crazy. That maybe, this tiny victory is a promise of something bigger. He jogs inside, sweaty and smiling, and for the first time in a long while, his mother sees a light in his eyes that not even the world's weight can dim. That night, as he lies in bed, the sound of the ball still echoes in his ears. Bounce, bounce, bounce. He smiles to himself, whispering the words that now feel less like hope and more like destiny. One day, and just like that, the glimpse of fire becomes the fuel for everything yet to come. The schoolyard was never kind to dreamers. Kids noticed everything: your shoes, your clothes, the way you walked, the mistakes you made. And for him, the boy with the frayed sneakers and the cracked basketball, ridicule came easy. At first, they laughed when he stayed after school, dribbling alone while they walked home in groups. "Why do you even try?" One kid jeered, leaning against the fence. "You'll never be good enough." The word stung, but not in the way they expected. For a moment, his chest tightened, the ball slowing in his hands. But then, almost instinctively, he gripped it tighter, as if their laughter was fuel. He didn't respond, didn't look up. He just kept bouncing, 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 as if each strike of the ball against the pavement was his answer. Day after day, he returned. Sometimes it was freezing, his breath visible in the air as he practiced under the dim streetlights. Sometimes it rained, soaking his shirt, and making the court slippery. But he showed up anyway, because every shot, every miss, every failure was a brick laid in the foundation of his dream. And slowly, something began to change. The same kids who once mocked him started lingering longer, watching from the sidelines. They saw how he missed, but kept going. They saw how he stumbled, but rose again. And though they wouldn't admit it, something about his persistence unsettled them. Because deep down, they knew they would have quit long ago. One afternoon, as he played alone, the sound of sneakers approached. A boy taller than him, stronger, one of the popular ones, stepped onto the cracked court. "Bet you can't beat me one-on-one." The boy smirked, spinning the ball on his finger. For a moment, fear surged. This was different. Practicing alone was safe. Facing someone else meant exposing weakness. But then he remembered the whisper he carried, the dream that had been born in the silence of his room. He swallowed his fear, nodded, and tightened his laces. The game was messy. He slipped, fumbled, and got pushed around. The taller boy scored easily at first, laughing every time he missed. But somewhere in the chaos, something shifted. The hours of lonely practice, the scraped knees, the relentless repetition, they started to show. He stole the ball once, scored once, and when it went through the hoop, the laughter stopped. For the first time, the world noticed. By the end, he lost badly, but it didn't matter, because he had proven something, not just to the other kids, but to himself. He could stand. He could fight. He could belong on that court, no matter what they said. That evening, walking home with sweat dripping down his back and dirt smeared on his hands, he felt a strange calm. The dream wasn't just alive, it was demanding more. And though the world had barely begun to notice, he understood a truth most never do. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to keep showing up until they have no choice but to see you. And so, night after night, he returned. With every dribble, every shot, every bruise, the boy who once dreamed in silence was slowly teaching the world that he could not be ignored. At home, the dream felt heavier. The boy never told his mother about the fire that had been lit inside him. She was already carrying too much. The endless shifts, the stack of bills, the quiet sighs at the kitchen table when she thought no one was listening. She loved him fiercely, but love doesn't pay rent, and love doesn't erase the worry carved into her face each night. So he kept quiet. He would come home sweaty, dirt on his arms, shoes muddy. But when she asked about school, he just shrugged. It was fine, he'd say, slipping past her, hiding the ball behind his back like it was contraband. In his room, though, the silence became his ally. He practiced dribbling in the dark, careful not to wake his younger sister. He whispered plays to himself, imagined crowds, victories, moments where everything changed. The silence that had once been suffocating now became a sanctuary, a place where he could hold the fragile spark without fear of it being crushed. But silence also has weight. There were nights he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his chest tight with doubt. What if the others were right? What if he was wasting his time? What if the world was too big, too harsh, too unforgiving for a kid like him? He imagined his mother's disappointment if he failed, the way she'd shake her head, tired eyes saying, "I warned you not to dream too big." Those thoughts pressed on him like bricks, heavy, suffocating. He wanted to share his vision, to shout it, to let someone else carry even a piece of it. But dreams, he had learned, are fragile things. Sometimes it's safer to keep them hidden than to risk them being laughed at, broken, or dismissed. And so, he bore the silence alone. At school, he was just another kid. At home, he was just a son. But in the moments between, on cracked courts, in dark rooms, under flickering streetlights, he was something else. Someone else. A dreamer, a fighter, a believer in a future no one else could see. The silence was heavy, yes, but in that weight, he found strength. Because carrying a dream in secret taught him something invaluable. If you can keep believing when no one else even knows what you're fighting for, then you're already stronger than most. And though the silence pressed hard against his chest, he whispered into the dark, promising himself, "One day, I'll break this silence so loud, the world won't be able to ignore me." The first test never arrives when you're ready. It comes suddenly, like a storm out of nowhere, and it forces you to decide whether your dream is just a wish or a promise you've made to yourself. For him, it came on a chilly autumn afternoon. The court was damp from rain, the leaves scattered across the cracked concrete. He had been practicing for hours, his breath puffing in the cold air, his hands raw from the ball's rough grip. Every muscle in his leg screamed at him to stop, but he kept going. Bounce. Step. Shoot. Mississippi chase. Repeat. Then it happened. He lunged for the ball, foot sliding on a wet patch of pavement. His ankle twisted sharply beneath him, and he went down hard. The pain shot up his leg like fire, and for the first time, he lay on the ground unable to move. The ball rolled lazily away, bumping against the fence, as if mocking him. Tears welled in his eyes, not just from the pain, but from fear. What if this was it? What if one bad fall ended everything before it even began? He pressed his palms into the cold ground, chest heaving, mind racing with doubt. Maybe the others were right. Maybe this isn't for me. But then, through the blur of pain, another thought cut through. This is the test. This is the moment that decides whether I quit or rise. With grit clenched between his teeth, he dragged himself upright, leaning on the fence. His ankle throbbed, every step like a knife. But he refused to leave without finishing what he started. He limped back to the ball, lifted it into his hands, and took another shot. It clanged against the rim, bouncing off, but he didn't care. The shot wasn't the victory. Standing back up was. Later that night, his mother noticed his limp. "What happened?" she asked, worry etched deep in her tired face. "Just fell," he said softly, brushing it off. He didn't tell her the truth. He didn't tell her how close he had come to giving up, because the dream wasn't just about him anymore. It was about proving to himself, and one day to her, that the pain was worth it. For the next week, he hobbled through school, ignored the teasing, and returned to the court every evening. Each step hurt, but each step also hardened him. He was learning that dreams don't ask if you're comfortable. They ask if you're committed. And in those painful nights, as he dribbled through the ache, he discovered something extraordinary. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is the price. And if you're willing to pay it, the dream will grow stronger than the hurt. Under the dim streetlight, with his ankle wrapped tight and his body aching, he whispered the words through clenched teeth, not as a hope this time, but as a vow. One day, this pain will be the reason I win. Every dreamer eventually reaches a point where the fire inside isn't enough. You can burn bright, you can push hard, but without guidance, the flames risk burning out. And sometimes, when you least expect it, life places someone in your path to shape the spark into something greater. For him, that moment came on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The court was nearly empty, just the sound of his ball echoing against the pavement. He was practicing his shots, sweat dripping from his brow, ignoring the sting in his ankle that hadn't fully healed. His shirt clung to his back. His breaths came short, but he refused to stop. Over and over again, the ball hit the rim, sometimes sinking, sometimes bouncing away. He chased it every time, relentless. An older man leaned against the chain-link fence, watching silently. His jacket was worn, a cap pulled low over his face. The boy hadn't noticed him at first, too caught up in the rhythm of his practice. But after a few minutes, the man spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You play like you're running from something," he said. The boy froze, clutching the ball to his chest, eyes darting toward the stranger. He didn't know whether to be embarrassed or defensive. "I'm just practicing," he muttered. The man stepped closer, his gait slow but deliberate. His eyes, sharp and steady, carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and lost too much, but still believed in something. "Practicing's one thing," he said, "but what you're doing, that's hunger. Hunger will take you further than talent ever will." The boy blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Most people dismissed him. Most people told him to stop wasting his time. But this man's words cut through, sharp and real. "Who are you?" the boy finally asked. The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Nobody special anymore. I used to play. Had a shot at something bigger once. Life, well, it didn't go the way I thought it would. But I know what I see." He pointed at the boy's chest. "And I see fire. Don't let anyone put that out. The boy felt something shift inside him. For the first time, someone outside his own heart had recognized the dream. He didn't know this man, didn't know his story, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the validation, the reminder that he wasn't crazy for believing in something bigger. Before leaving, the man gave him one last piece of advice. If you're serious, if this isn't just a game to you, then understand this. Talent is a gift, but discipline is a choice. And discipline will always outlast talent. With that, the man walked away, his figure fading into the golden light of evening. The boy stood frozen, the ball heavy in his hands. He didn't even know the man's name, but he didn't need to. Those words were enough. That night, when he returned to his room, the silence felt different. Not as heavy, not as lonely, because now there was proof that someone else had seen what he felt. A stranger had looked past his mistakes, his small frame, his broken shoes, and had seen his hunger. And sometimes, that's all a dreamer needs. Just one voice reminding them they're not alone. The boy lay awake, replaying the man's words, whispering them over and over until they became a vow carved into his soul. Discipline will outlast talent. And with that, his dream grew stronger. The court at night was a different world. The sun gone, the chatter of kids vanished, the city around him settling into its rhythm of quiet and chaos. Streetlights buzzed faintly, casting broken shadows across the cracked pavement. For most, this was the time to rest. For him, it was the time to grind. He would sneak outside when the house was quiet, careful not to wake his little sister or worry his mother. The ball felt heavier in his hands at night, the silence pressing on his shoulders, but it was in that stillness that he came alive. Bounce, bounce, bounce. The rhythm echoed against the empty walls, the sound carrying into the night like a heartbeat that refused to stop. No one clapped when he made a shot. No one cheered when he pushed past exhaustion. But he didn't need an audience, because greatness is built in the shadows, long before the spotlight ever arrives. Sometimes his body begged him to quit. His palms burned from the leather, his knees ached from the constant pounding, and his lungs screamed for air. But then he'd remember the stranger's words. Discipline will outlast talent. And discipline meant showing up even when no one was watching, especially when no one was watching. On some nights, he would collapse against the fence, sweat dripping down his face, chest heaving like he'd run for miles. He would stare up at the stars, the ball resting at his side, and wonder if they could see him, if the universe somehow knew he was out here, fighting for something bigger. And then he would rise, because dreams don't wait for the well-rested. They demand sacrifice. Across the street, windows glowed softly. Families laughed in their living rooms. People watched TV. Life went on. But he wasn't part of that world, not yet. He had chosen something different, something harder. And though loneliness often crept in, wrapping its cold hands around his chest, he reminded himself, this is what it takes. Years from now, when people would see him succeed, they'd call it talent. They'd call it luck. But he would know the truth. Success is born in the nights no one sees. And as the ball thudded against the pavement one last time before he slipped back inside, he whispered into the dark, as if speaking to his future self. They don't see me now, but one day they will. It happened quietly, like most breakthroughs do. No cameras, no crowd, just him, his ball, and the hoop nailed crookedly to the garage wall. He had been working on the same move for weeks, dribble, step, fake, shoot. And every time, it seemed just out of reach. But that night, something clicked. His body moved smoother, his feet lighter, his hands more sure. The ball left his fingertips, spinning in the cool night air. And when it dropped clean through the net, there was no rim, no bounce, no doubt. Just the sound of swish. For a moment he froze. Did that really happen? Then he tried again. Swish. Again. Swish. The rhythm was no longer a struggle, but a song, one he had learned through failure, persistence, and pain. He lifted his arms in the air, not because anyone was watching, but because he knew this moment mattered. This was proof. Proof that the long nights, the scraped knees, the twisted ankle, the loneliness, none of it had been wasted. He laughed, a sound of pure joy, echoing into the empty street. His mother, peeking out from the window, heard it, and smiled softly. She didn't know what had just happened, but she could see the glow in his face, the light in his eyes. This wasn't the dream fulfilled, not even close. But it was the first taste of victory, the first whisper that maybe, just maybe, the impossible was possible. And that taste was enough to fuel him for years. Part 9, The Doubter's Return, Keynote 1, The Birth of a Dream. Word spreads quickly in small places. Soon, kids who once laughed at him began to notice the changes. He moved faster, shot sharper, carried himself differently. And with their attention came their voices, louder now, sharper, designed to pierce. You really think you're going somewhere? Don't forget where you're from. Dreams like yours don't happen to kids like us. Every word was meant to remind him of the limits people believed in, the streets he lived on, the broken sidewalks, the tired faces around him. These were supposed to be cages, not stepping stones. At first, the doubts crept in like shadows. He lay awake some nights, replaying their words, his chest tightening with fear. What if they were right? What if all this work was leading nowhere? But then he remembered the fire, the whisper that had been born in silence. He remembered the stranger's words, the nights no one saw, the first small victory. And slowly, he turned the doubt into fuel. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Every word became another reason to keep going, another reason to prove them wrong. Because he had learned something the doubters never understood. People laugh at what they don't believe in. And sometimes, they laugh the loudest when they see you're about to prove them wrong. Dreams demand a price, and he began to pay it. He stopped going to hangouts after school, stopped wasting hours in front of the TV, stopped chasing the distractions that kept others comfortable. Instead, he poured every ounce of himself into the game. His friends noticed. Some drifted away, calling him obsessed, boring, even crazy. It hurt, because he missed the laughter, the easy company. But deep down, he knew this was the cost. You cannot hold a dream in one hand and comfort in the other. His mother noticed too. She worried he was pushing too hard, worried he was carrying too much for someone his age. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something stronger than exhaustion. She saw purpose. And though it scared her, she let him chase it. Night after night, sacrifice carved him into someone new. His body grew stronger, his focus sharper. And while others laughed and played, he built the foundation of a future they couldn't even imagine. Sacrifice hurt, yes, but it also purified. It stripped away the unnecessary and left only what mattered, the dream. Discipline became his closest friend. He woke before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in sleep, and practiced until his muscles burned. He stayed after school long after the bell, perfecting moves until the janitor flicked off the lights. He counted every repetition, tracked every step, obsessed not with talent but with progress. There were no shortcuts, no hacks, no miracles. Just the grind, just the relentless choice to do it again, and again, and again. And slowly, he transformed. The ball became an extension of his body. His feet moved like they carried memory. His hands knew the weight of every shot. What once felt impossible now became natural. He understood now. Discipline isn't about punishment. It's about love. Love for the dream. Love for the future. Love for the version of yourself you haven't met yet. And as he practiced alone under the rising sun, he whispered to himself, "This is what separates the dreamers from the doers." Every dreamer faces it, the breaking point. For him, it came one bitter winter night. His hands were numb, his breath sharp in the freezing air. Shot after shot clanged against the rim, bouncing away like the world itself was mocking him. His body ached, his mind screamed, and finally, he collapsed to his knees, the ball rolling away. Tears blurred his vision. What's the point? He thought. Why am I doing this? He imagined giving up, going inside, living a normal life, being just another kid from the block. The thought almost felt like relief. Almost. But then, in the silence, he remembered the boy lying in bed years ago, whispering into the dark, one day. He remembered the first swish, the stranger's advice, his mother's tired but hopeful eyes. And in that moment he realized something. The dream wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in him, even silently. To quit now would mean betraying more than himself. So he stood. He picked up the ball. And though his body felt broken, he whispered through gritted teeth, "I'm not done yet." And he wasn't. Breakthroughs don't come suddenly. They arrive after years of quiet battles, disguised as just another day. It was during a local game, nothing big, nothing fancy. But as he stepped onto the court, something felt different. The ball fit perfectly in his hands. His movements were fluid, effortless. Every shot he took found the net. Every move left defenders stumbling. The crowd, small but loud, erupted each time he scored. For the first time, others were seeing what he had always believed. For the first time, his dream wasn't invisible. When the game ended, sweat dripping down his face, chest heaving, he looked around at the cheering voices and realized this was the beginning. The breakthrough wasn't about winning the game. It was about proving the impossible possible. From that day forward, everything changed. Coaches started noticing. Older players nodded in respect. Kids who once laughed now whispered his name, with something close to awe. Opportunities appeared, small at first, but real. For the first time, he could see the shape of the dream forming in front of him. No longer just a whisper, no longer just a secret flame. It was becoming reality. But he knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was longer, harder, filled with challenges yet unseen. Still he smiled, because the dream that had been born in silence was now alive in the open. Late at night, he returned to the court alone. He placed the ball on the ground and stared at the hoop under the dim streetlight. This was where it all began. He thought of the lonely nights, the pain, the laughter of doubters, the words of the mentor, the sacrifices, the moments of almost quitting. All of it had led here. He closed his eyes, breathed deep, and whispered, not as hope this time, but as a promise. I will not stop. I will protect this dream with everything I have. One day, the world will know. And with that vow, the birth of the dream became its destiny. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that felt too dull to matter. He was walking home, backpack heavy, shoes worn, head filled with doubts. His dream still lived inside him, fragile and uncertain, like a candle flickering against the wind. That's when he saw him, an older man, standing outside the gym, leaning on a cane but holding himself with quiet strength. His presence was magnetic, the kind that made people slow down without knowing why. The man's eyes followed the kids playing ball, but there was a wisdom in them, a weight that came only from years of living, struggling, surviving. As he passed, the man spoke. You play. The boy froze, unsure whether to answer. Then he nodded shyly. The man's lips curved into a small smile. I can see it in the way you walk. You've got the fire. But fire needs direction, or it burns out. It was such a simple exchange, and yet it struck like lightning. Because until that moment, no one had ever spoken to him as if his dream was real. No one had seen it in him. The man's words planted something deeper than motivation. They planted belief. And belief, he would learn, is the soil where dreams take root. The bleachers creaked beneath their weight, the sun hanging low in the sky like an orange coin, spilling long shadows across the cracked pavement. The boy sat forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the man who called himself coach. His cane rested against the bench, his hands folded, his eyes fixed not on the court, but on something far away. Memories, perhaps, from a time long before. You see this court? Coach began, his voice a steady rumble, weathered by years, yet sharp enough to demand attention. It wasn't always here. Back in my day, we played on dirt patches behind broken-down buildings. If you had a ball, you were lucky. If you had shoes, you were blessed. The boy listened in silence, his own sneakers scuffed from use, suddenly aware of the privilege hidden in them. Coach continued, painting pictures with words, each story carrying the weight of decades. I was your age when I first touched a basketball. The first time I dribbled, it felt like magic. Like I'd found the thing I was born to do. And I wasn't bad at it, no, I was good. I had speed. I had hands. I had fire. People told me I'd go far. They told me the game would take me places. And for a while, I believed them. His gaze drifted off, the corners of his mouth tightening, as if he was holding back an invisible ache. But believing isn't always enough. Because no matter how good I was, I couldn't change the world I lived in. I couldn't change the color of my skin. The boy shifted uncomfortably. He had heard whispers about such things from his mother, about how people had to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. But hearing it like this, raw and direct, pierced deeper. Coach sighed, leaning back against the bench. I remember one game. State championship. I dropped 35 points, carried my team on my back. Scouts were in the crowd, college men with clipboards, taking notes. I thought that was my moment. I thought, finally, all the hours, all the sweat, it was about to pay off. His voice cracked slightly, his jaw tight. But after the game, those same scouts shook hands with my teammates, the ones who scored 5, 6 points, and walked right past me like I wasn't there, like I was invisible. The boy's heart twisted. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Coach's eyes hardened, and yet behind them lay a quiet sadness. Because my skin wasn't the right color for them. Because no matter how well I played, no matter how bright I burned, their eyes were trained to look past me. They told me I was good for the neighborhood leagues, that I should be proud just to play. But I wanted more than scraps. He paused, his hands tightening on his knees. So I kept pushing. I trained harder. I scored more. I carried whole seasons. And still, the door stayed closed. Eventually, I realized I wasn't just playing against other boys on the court. I was playing against a world that didn't want me to win. Silence fell between them, heavy, suffocating. The boy could almost hear the echo of a younger coach running down a court, sweat flying, crowd cheering, only for those cheers to dissolve into emptiness when opportunity never came. But here's the thing, Coach said suddenly, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto the boys. I let it break me. I let the bitterness eat at me until I stopped playing. I stopped believing, and I promised myself one thing. I would never let another young man with fire in his chest give up the way I did. That's why I'm talking to you. The boy's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but words failed. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if carrying the weight of Coach's confession inside his own chest. Coach's voice softened now, almost fatherly. You've got something I see clear as day, but you're going to have to fight harder than most. And you can't let the world decide your worth, because the world will try. Every single day. The boy swallowed hard, his fists curling. For the first time, his dream didn't feel like just a dream. It felt like a responsibility. The sky above them turned dusky purple, streetlights flickering to life. The court was empty now, but in the boy's mind, it was alive with ghosts, ghosts of players like Coach, who had burned bright but been dimmed by a world too blind to see them. As they stood, Coach picked up his cane, moving slower than the fire in his eyes suggested. Remember my story, he said, his tone final yet urgent. Not to pity me, but to remind yourself. You have to play like your future depends on it, because it does. The boy walked home that night with a different weight in his chest, not the burden of doubt, but the burden of history. A fire that wasn't just his anymore. And in that fire, a promise began to form. I won't let the world erase me. Not like it did him. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet where even the hum of insects seemed distant, muted, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The boy walked slowly along the cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood, his mind still replaying Coach's voice, each word echoing like a drumbeat in his chest. I let it break me. Don't let it break you. He kept hearing it, again and again, as though it was carved into his very bones. The streetlights buzzed above him, casting cones of yellow light that stretched long shadows across his path. His sneakers scuffed against the concrete, the sound oddly grounding against the storm building in his head. Every block carried him deeper into thought. He saw the kids on the corner, laughing, tossing an old soda can back and forth, their dreams smaller, their goals limited to surviving another day. He knew them well, boys who never thought beyond tomorrow, because life had taught them not to. He used to think he was different from them, that his dream was bigger, but now he wondered if the world saw him the same way Coach described. Another boy with fire in his chest that would be smothered before it had a chance to spread. He stopped beneath a flickering lamp and leaned against the cool metal pole, staring at the cracked pavement beneath his feet. His chest felt heavy, as though the weight of Coach's past had somehow settled inside him. He imagined Coach as a young man, quick on his feet, dazzling the crowd, every jump shot hitting nothing but net. He imagined the roar of the audience, the hope swelling in his chest. And then he imagined the silence after the scouts turned their backs, the invisible wall that had stolen a future. The boy clenched his fists. His stomach twisted with anger, not just at the injustice of it, but at the fear that the same fate could be waiting for him. What if my dream dies the same way? He thought. What if no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I give, it's never enough because of who I am, because of where I come from? He kicked a loose pebble across the street, watching it clatter into darkness. The sound was small, insignificant, swallowed by the night. And for a moment he felt the same, small, unseen, like the pebble. But then, beneath the fear, another voice rose up. Not Coach's voice this time. His own. Quiet, trembling, but undeniable. What if I refuse to be erased? What if I fight, even when they want me to disappear? His breath caught. The thought sent a jolt through him, like a spark catching on dry wood. He straightened, pushing off the lamppost, and started walking again, his pace faster, more determined. As he neared his block, he saw his little sister, sitting on the front steps of their building, cradling a worn-out doll in her arms. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, her eyes bright, her innocence untouched by the weight of the world he was beginning to feel. That smile hit him harder than anything Coach had said, because suddenly, his dream wasn't just his anymore. It was hers too. It was for every kid who looked up to him, for everyone who needed proof that someone from their street, their world, could break through the barriers stacked against them. He sat beside her, ruffling her hair as she giggled and leaned into him. The heaviness in his chest didn't go away, but it transformed, less like a burden, more like armor. The weight of Coach's words wasn't something meant to crush him. It was meant to shape him, to remind him that the fight wasn't optional. It was necessary. Later that night, lying awake in his small bedroom, he stared at the cracked ceiling above his bed. His fists rested against his chest, and in the quiet, he whispered a promise into the dark. I won't let it break me. I won't let it end the way it ended for you, Coach. Not for me. Not for her. And in that moment, the dream stopped being fragile. It stopped being just a hope. It became a mission to fight, to endure, to rise, not just for himself, but for everyone who needed proof that dreams could survive. Outside, the night carried on as usual, but inside him, something had shifted forever. The morning sun slipped through the thin curtains of his room, spilling golden light across the floorboards that were warped from years of wear. He hadn't slept much. His mind was still restless, carrying the weight of Coach's words from the night before. But instead of exhaustion, he felt a new kind of energy, raw, unsteady, but undeniable. It was as if something inside him had been lit, and even though it flickered like a small candle in the dark, it refused to die out. He sat up, rubbing his hands across his face, and stared at the pair of scuffed basketball shoes lying by the door. They weren't much, hand-me-downs from a cousin who'd outgrown them, but to him, they were armor. He laced them up, tight and deliberate, as though every knot was a silent declaration. I'm not giving up. Not now. Not ever. The city was awake when he stepped outside. The sounds of car horns, distant music, and voices spilling from open windows filled the air, weaving together into the rough symphony of his neighborhood. Kids chased each other down the street with makeshift toys, and an older man pushed a cart of fruit down the block, calling out his prices. Life was ordinary, but inside him, nothing felt ordinary anymore. He carried his basketball under his arm as he made his way to the cracked court 3 blocks away. It was early, and the place was empty. The chain-link fence rattled when he pushed through, and the faint smell of concrete and rust hit him like a memory. This court had been his sanctuary, the one place where the noise of the world faded and only the rhythm of the ball mattered. He bounced it once. The sound echoed sharp and loud, cutting through the morning air. He bounced it again, faster, harder, until the sound was steady, like a drumbeat to match the pulse in his chest. As he dribbled, His mind replayed every moment from the night before, the way Coach's voice cracked, the way fear had crawled into his chest, and the way his sister's smile had pulled him back from the edge. He wasn't just practicing anymore. He was making a choice. He took a deep breath, crouched low, and launched himself toward the hoop. His sneakers squeaked against the asphalt as he drove forward, the ball rolling off his fingertips, the sound of the net whispering as it caught the shot. It wasn't perfect. The rim rattled, but it went in, and that was enough. The spark inside him flared brighter. Every shot he took after that was more than practice. It was a statement. With every dribble, every jump, every bead of sweat dripping down his forehead, he was telling the world, I'm still here. I'm not broken. I won't be erased. By the time the sun had climbed high, his shirt was soaked through, and his chest heaved with exhaustion. But when he looked up at the rim, bent slightly from years of rough play, he didn't just see metal and net. He saw a future, a possibility, a door that might open if he had the courage to keep knocking. As he sat on the edge of the court, catching his breath, a thought rose in him like a tide. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about proving that the spark inside him could survive every attempt to put it out. That afternoon, as he walked home, he caught his reflection in a store window. Sweat clung to his skin, and his eyes were tired. But there was something new there too, something fierce. He stopped for a moment, staring at himself, and whispered under his breath, "This is just the beginning." And it was. Because the spark wasn't just burning now. It was spreading. Slowly, steadily, like dawn chasing away the night. The spark burned bright for days. Every morning, he returned to that cracked court, dribbling until the sound of the ball echoed through the neighborhood, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. His muscles ached, his hands blistered, but he welcomed the pain. It felt like proof, evidence that he was pushing against the limits of who he had been. For the first time in years, he felt alive. But life, as it often does, didn't let him hold onto that light for long. It was a week later when doubt came knocking again, sharp and merciless. It began with whispers on the street, voices that carried mockery disguised as laughter. "Look at him," someone snickered, acting like he's going to make it out, like he's special. Another voice, colder, followed. "Dreams don't pay rent. He'll end up just like the rest of us, stuck." The words stung because they weren't new. He had heard them all his life, from neighbors who had once dreamed themselves, from tired relatives who had been beaten down by the system. And as much as he wanted to ignore it, the poison of their doubt seeped in. That night, sitting at the dinner table, he noticed the bills stacked high near the edge, his mother's face shadowed with worry as she scanned each envelope. His younger sister hummed quietly to herself, unaware, scribbling in her notebook. He tried to focus on her joy, but his mother's silence felt heavier than the room itself. And then the thought hit him like a punch. What if they're right? What if this dream is just another way to set myself up for failure? He pushed his food around his plate, appetite gone. Upstairs, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of sirens in the distance. His chest tightened as the spark inside him flickered. Doubt had a way of wrapping itself around him like chains, dragging him back into the darkness he thought he'd escaped. The next morning, he walked to the court slower than usual. The ball felt heavier in his hands. Each shot he took seemed to miss more than it landed. His rhythm faltered, his confidence crumbled. By noon, frustration had taken over. He slammed the ball against the fence, the clang echoing in the empty space. "What's the point?" he muttered to himself, voice cracking. The silence that followed was brutal. But as he stood there, chest heaving, he remembered Coach's words from that night, the trembling voice telling him not to let the darkness win. He remembered his sister's laughter, the way she looked at him like he was a hero. He remembered the promise he whispered to himself, "I'm not broken. I won't be erased." He sank to the ground, pressing his palms against the rough concrete, and closed his eyes. The doubt didn't vanish. It never did. But somewhere deep inside, he realized something important. Doubt wasn't the enemy. Doubt was a test to see if the spark could survive when the world tried to smother it. Slowly, he picked up the ball again. His hands still shook, his chest still hurt, but he rose to his feet. One dribble, then another, then a shot. It clanged off the rim, But he didn't stop. Another shot. Then another. Until finally, the ball slid through the net with a soft whisper. The sound wasn't victory, it was survival. Walking home that evening, he felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve. Doubt had returned, and it would return again. But so long as he kept showing up, so long as he kept choosing to rise, the spark would keep burning. The city was quieter that night, or maybe it only felt that way because his thoughts were louder than ever. He lay in bed, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling, listening to the hum of the old radiator and the distant thud of footsteps outside. Sleep refused to come. His mind replayed the laughter, the doubt, the missed shots. Each memory pressed against him like heavy stones, threatening to bury the spark he had fought so hard to protect. But underneath the noise of failure, there was something else. A whisper, faint but steady, rising from deep within him. It wasn't the voice of the people who mocked him. It wasn't the stern tone of teachers who told him to be realistic. It wasn't even Coach's voice. No, this was different. This was his own voice. The part of him that refused to die, no matter how many times the world tried to silence it. You are not them, it said. You are not broken. You are not finished. You are more. The words startled him at first. He sat up, clutching his knees, as if afraid that even this fragile voice might disappear if he moved too suddenly. For years, he had been taught to doubt himself, to question his worth, to measure his value against a system designed to see him fail. And yet, here was this voice, rising defiantly against everything. He closed his eyes and let it grow louder. Images filled his mind, the cracked court glowing under the streetlight, the fire in his chest the first time he picked up the ball, the look in his sister's eyes when she called him her hero. He saw the hardships, yes, the bills, the empty cupboards, the sirens, but even those images carried something else now. Strength. The proof that he had already survived so much. If he could survive that, why not this? Tears stung his eyes as he whispered aloud, almost afraid to hear the sound of his own courage. I am not my doubt. I am my dream. The next morning, something shifted. He woke earlier than usual, lacing up his shoes before the sun had even risen. The air was sharp and cold, biting at his skin as he walked to the court. But inside, the warmth of that voice remained. Each step felt deliberate, a small rebellion against the part of him that wanted to quit. When he reached the court, the sky was painted in soft shades of gray and pink, the world still asleep. He dribbled once, the sound echoing like a heartbeat, and suddenly he felt it. The silence was no longer empty. It was his, a sacred space where doubt couldn't follow. Shot after shot, miss after miss, he kept going, not out of desperation, but out of defiance. Each miss didn't sting as sharply now, because he understood something. Progress was not about perfection. It was about persistence. By mid-morning, sweat drenched his shirt, his legs trembled, and his arms felt like lead. But in his chest, that voice kept speaking, not as a whisper now, but as a steady rhythm, in sync with his breath. Keep going. Don't stop. You are more. When he finally sank onto the ground, breathless, the court spinning around him, he smiled. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of failure. He wasn't afraid of the laughter, the bills, or even the future, because as long as that voice lived within him, he knew he could keep moving forward. The world might try to silence him again tomorrow, but tonight, under the rising sun, he discovered something indestructible. The dream wasn't just in the ball, the court, or even the success he craved. The dream was in him, and his voice, his true voice, was the shield that would protect it. The night air was colder than usual, sharp enough to sting his lungs as he walked home from the court. His body ached in places he didn't even know could hurt, every muscle screaming with exhaustion. But his mind was alive. It was as though something inside him had finally shifted, like a door had opened to a place he had been searching for all along. He paused halfway down the street, standing under a flickering street lamp. The glow painted half his face in light, half in shadow, just like his life, caught between hope and hardship. He looked at his hands, blistered and raw from hours of dribbling and shooting, and he realized they weren't just hands anymore. They were his tools, his weapons, his proof. That's when it happened. He didn't say it out loud, didn't need to. But deep inside, in a place where no one could hear, he made a vow. He swore that he would never let this dream die. Not because the world owed him anything. Not because he believed success would be easy. But because for the first time, he understood that the dream wasn't just about him. It was about everyone who had ever doubted themselves. Everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. It was about his family, his sister, his community. People who needed to see that someone could rise from the cracks and reach for the stars. The vow burned like fire in his chest, steady and unshakable. No matter how long it takes, no matter how much it hurts, I will not quit. The days that followed were brutal. The mornings came earlier, the nights stretched longer. There were moments when his body collapsed on the bed, too weak to move, when his stomach growled with hunger louder than his voice. But through it all, the oath whispered in his mind, carrying him forward. At school, when classmates laughed at his worn-out shoes or mocked his obsession with a ball, he tightened his jaw and remembered the promise. On the court, when shot after shot clanged against the rim, he pushed harder, knowing that every failure was sharpening him. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and crimson, he stayed on the court until darkness swallowed the lines. The neighborhood lights flickered on, one by one, until the court was barely visible. Still he played, alone, with nothing but the sound of the ball and his ragged breathing. It was there, in that quiet space, that he felt the vow become more than words. It became part of him. Every bead of sweat was a signature. Every missed shot was another clause. Every moment of pain was an unbreakable seal. By the time he walked off the court, chest heaving, legs dragging, he was no longer the boy who only dreamed when he was awake. He was the boy who dreamed even in exhaustion, even in pain, even in silence. And though no one heard it, though no one saw it, he knew he had carved his oath into the very fabric of his being. The world might forget his name tomorrow, but he would not forget this promise. Because promises made to the world can break, but promises made to yourself, those are eternal. And in that silence, under the cover of night, he became unbreakable. In our story, the boy makes a silent oath to himself. Now, let's pause for a second and learn something from this moment. The word oath means a serious promise, usually unbreakable. In daily life, we can say, I took an oath to always stay honest with myself. The phrase, burned like fire in his chest, is an expression that means something felt so powerful, it couldn't be ignored. For example, her dream burned like fire in her chest, pushing her forward. Another useful phrase is tightened his jaw. It means to prepare yourself with determination, even when things are tough. Example, he tightened his jaw and faced the challenge head-on. Finally, the word unbreakable means something so strong it cannot be destroyed. We can also use it for people's willpower. Her belief in herself was unbreakable. So, in this story, these words don't just tell us what the boy felt, they also give us powerful English to use in our own lives. From this chapter of story, here are life lessons we can carry with us. Dreams become real when they are turned into promises. Don't just wish, commit. Make an oath to yourself that failure will not end you. Pain is not the enemy, it is the evidence of growth. Every blister, every late night, every setback is proof that you are building strength. Silence builds character. Not every promise needs an audience. Sometimes the most powerful vows are the ones made in the quiet, with no one watching. Unbreakable willpower beats temporary motivation. Motivation fades, but an oath, an unshakable inner promise, will carry you through the darkest nights. And so, standing under that flickering street lamp, with hands bruised and spirit on fire, he wasn't just a boy chasing a dream anymore. He was a boy who had become his dream. That is the lesson for all of us. Your dream will not survive unless you protect it with an oath. Not to the world, not to your friends, but to yourself. So tonight, I challenge you. Make your silent oath. Close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, and promise yourself that you will not quit, no matter what. Because when the world forgets your name, when the crowd disappears, it's that promise to yourself that will keep you alive, keep you fighting, and keep you rising. Remember, promises made to the world can break. Promises made to yourself are eternal.